I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. All right, so quick housekeeping as a reminder. Oh, apparently not. This is Creative Advocacy Week's training. The quick reminder, some housekeeping. Do use the chat function. We love a chat function and we'll be tracking things. We'll also be putting links in there so that you can pull up items as well as we go along. So as hopefully many of you know, Creative Sector Advocacy Week is an effort to bring more visibility to the vital role that we know that artists, creative communities, cultural organizations, creative workers bring to Massachusetts. And that means a lot of advocacy, it means a lot of education, and there's no one right way to do that. And so we are really looking to expand out the ways that folks are doing that by hosting some local and regional convenings that are happening throughout the week. And then we're sort of centering a lot of celebration at the State House on Wednesday from 10 to 3, where we will have speakers. We'll have a formal speaking program in the morning, time to network. Then we'll have performances and creative displays and exhibits happening in the Great Hall and the Grand Staircase until 3 o'clock. And then the rest of the week, we continue on with our advocacy actions. So we're going to start with our guest speaker tonight, Norman Abbott, who's going to talk about how to be an effective advocate. Norman is the Senior Government Affairs Specialist at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Before that, he worked for Congressman Seth Moulton as a regional director, and he also worked as an aide in the Patrick administration. He also has experience outside of working for elected officials by working with the New England Anti-Defamation League. And we just learned before this call started, he organized for Obama in 2012. So Norman has a wealth of experience, and he's going to share just a little bit with you about what makes for a compelling message, how to really be effective in your advocacy with elected officials. So Norman, I can take the slide deck down if that's helpful.
Sure, that'd be great. It would be great to see folks. Hi, everybody. As Emily so nicely introduced me, my name is Norman Abbott. I'm with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Excited to talk to you guys about advocacy this evening. I also use he, him pronouns as well. So starting off, like Emily said, there's not really a step-by-step, this is the definitive way to advocate. But I'm going to give you guys a couple tips and suggestions for going into this. And sort of ways that you can be perhaps the most effective. The first thing that I always say to folks is before you go into your elected official's office, make a plan. It doesn't have to be super, super in-depth. It doesn't have to be something, where you're writing out specifically everything, that you're going to say. It could be simple, simply as something as like, Kelsey's going to do the introduction of why we're here. Catherine's going to talk about the Place Act. Ruth is going to talk about, creative preservation. Simply going through those, what the roles are there will really sort of set you up for success and sort of know what you're going to be able to go into. The second thing that goes along with that is Emily and the team have put together some really great fact sheets. Take a few moments before you go in to sort of review what the legislation is. If there's something that specifically sort of speaks to you, it's a good idea for you to perhaps be the person to speak to that. A lot of the times when you're going into this, facts, figures are great, and sometimes that speaks to people, but oftentimes what can really move the needle is personal stories. Do you have a personal connection to, the Place Act? Have you seen friends or family been, displaced by development that, has pushed artists out of a certain community into another community? That's really helpful. One of the third things I would say to prepare you before you actually go into this meeting too, is I'm going to let you in on a secret as long as you promise not to tell folks. The State House is actually run by 22 to 28-year-olds for the most part. So don't be surprised if you're going into one of these meetings. You may not get the rep or the senator themselves. You may get somebody who's, a bit younger. They may not have a ton of it, direct experience with some of the things that you're talking about, or this may be their first or second job out of college. Don't be put off by that. I know that a lot of folks are can be shocked when they see somebody who's a little bit younger and surprised sort of what's going on. A lot of these folks are the people that are really advising the reps, the senators on what's going on, and are really the folks that are helping to drive the agenda and sort of convincing them on specific legislation. So don't be disappointed if it's not the representative themselves, because oftentimes having the conversation with the staff can be more impactful than even having the conversation directly with the legislature, because the staff members will ask you real questions. They will probably give you real and non-canned responses to some of the things that you have to say, and can be a little bit more candid than you might be anticipating, which is all great. So that that's one thing. And sorry, I'm seeing the chat's coming into it in a second. So that's just to prepare you for when you're going in. When you get in there, it's important to sort of give a brief introduction. Who are you? Why are you there today? Do you live in the representative's district? That's always great, because then you may see them paying a little bit more attention to you because you're a voter. You vote for them. You put them in office, so they'll be really curious about what your input is. Then it's great to sort of move into the priorities. Stick to sort of you'll have a list of priorities. It's great to sort of speak to maybe 3 at max, just because that if you're talking about 5, 10, 15 different pieces of legislation, they might get confused and their eyes might glaze over. So you may want to pick 3. I believe the MASSCreative has 5 agenda that you can try for 5, but if you want to do 3, sometimes that's great too. Don't feel like you're missing out on anything by doing that. The final 2 things that I would speak to before sort of maybe taking folks' questions that may have some concerns or things that I haven't touched on. If you've got somebody, see if you can assign somebody to take notes, especially if you're hearing anything that's important. Somebody might say something like, "Oh man, we just heard that this bill is going to move out of committee." That's great news. That might be something that Kelsey, Emily, and I usually don't know. So being able to give that information back to us is really sort of helpful and can provide us with some information on what we need to do for next steps. Second, you may get asked a question that you don't know the answer to. That's totally fine. It's perfect. You guys are volunteers. You're God bless all of you. You're giving your time to come in here at the State House and sort of lobby and sort of have these conversations with folks. It's okay not to have the answers to questions. What you can always say is, "Hey, thanks so much for asking that. I don't know, but we'll get you the answer. Come back, let Kelsey, myself, Emily know, that you got this question. We're happy to do the follow-up for you." And one final thing that I would say that's always helpful too, and sort of makes a big impression and may sound sort of odd and maybe a little strange to folks, is send a thank you note afterwards. All these folks, their staff, the rep themselves is online. The staff will have business cards. Feel free to send a thank you note, because that will stick with people a lot of times, and also gives you a chance to follow up and sort of reiterate any of the points you made, but also answer any questions that you may have been asked. And also just to continue building that relationship, because I think that MASSCreative and everybody else on this call wants to make sure this isn't just a one-time engagement. They want to make sure that this is a time when you can sort of come in and build this relationship and push for more funding for for the arts. And that's not something that ends at the end of this this cycle, and it's not something that's going to end in the end of 5 years. There's always going to need to be that push. So I know that that's a lot of me talking, and I'm happy to sort of hear from folks on sort of any sort of concerns or questions or thoughts that folks have about that. And I'm sure the rest of the team here would be happy to chime in as well.
So awesome. Thank you, Norman. Do folks have questions for Norman? I've got one. Norman, in your experience, what is like a classic thing that what's a myth? Like, I loved how you talked about like the staff, right? Is there another myth you can dispel for us as advocates about, because I think for many of us, it feels like we have to say the right thing, or we have to, talk in a certain way, but like what, from your perspective, when you were working in the Patrick administration and for Congressman Moulton, like, what did you find, like, was the biggest, one of the other myths that advocates should know?
Staff don't know everything, and the legislators may not know everything. Especially if you're going into a meeting with somebody who is not super familiar with the arts and culture legislation that's going on. This is a great opportunity to educate them. This is and to do so in like a a respectful manner. There are hundreds and thousands of bills frequently that are filed, and so each legislator has their pet bills that they're focused on primarily, and the ones that are coming before their committee. So even as a staffer, and especially for reps where they may only have one staffer, that one staffer has to try and be familiar with all these bills. And so what you're doing there is essentially coming to help educate them, not only about what's important to you, but sort of what's going on in the legislature as a whole. So it's really a great opportunity to sort of engage in that conversation and really sort of speak to them about the arts and culture, sector, and what it means to you, what it means to the economy, what it sort of means to in general, and what this legislation is actually going to do for not only you, but other people that you know.
Love it. Kelsey has a question.
More just a comment. I have a myth to dispel that Norman actually just got at. So I think there is sometimes the assumption that legislators have large offices filled with staff who can answer your calls or emails right away, and that's not always the reality. The Senate offices tend to be a little bit larger. They might have 4 to 5 full-time staff who are working for them, and many representatives have just one staffer who's wearing all of the hats. So that's all to say that if you reach out by email or phone next week to try to set up a meeting with your state representative or state senator, and you don't hear back from them right away, don't be alarmed or thrown by that. You might need to give them a couple of days. And also, if you are in the building on Wednesday, the 24th for the creative celebration and decide to stop by your legislator's office, they could be in session that day. They could have other meetings going on. So again, just be patient and understand that they might actually have fewer personnel doing the work than you might expect, but we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
And you all have valuable perspectives to share. Like, I think that is, I think that, folks on legislature, they deal with, people like myself and Emily and Kelsey frequently. We are emailing them, we're calling their offices, we're sending them letters, all that sort of stuff. I think the less comfortable you feel in that space, probably the more valuable your perspective is, because it's not something that is seen or heard from them, every day of the week. So I would really encourage folks that may sort of be on the fence about doing this to really embrace the opportunity. And there'll be tons of other folks there that will go with you. We're not sending you on your own to a legislator to do this and sort of, be the sole spokesperson for this legislative slate. It would not be like that. These advocacy days are really great opportunities to meet folks and to sort of collectively forge forward on a mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Norman's going to stick with us. We're going to talk about a couple of policy things at the end of this call, and the work that MAPC does actually dovetails really nicely with one of the big policy conversations we're going to have this evening. So thank you for sticking on the call. And if you've got more questions for Norman, the chat is open. Okay, so we are going to move along, and Richleen is going to talk about, okay, so here's the intro for Richleen. It has now been made clear that the really simple email that we have sent out, right, that many advocacy groups send out, that's like, put your name and address in, and it'll auto-populate a message and just send that to your legislator. Legislators have gotten wise to that. They know when it is a form email. And while they certainly are thinking about the number of their constituents who are thinking about this issue, we are really pulling back, you may have noticed, on sending out form emails. And so Richleen is going to talk a little bit about how you can really quickly and really simply engage and communicate with your lawmakers next week and moving on in other ways. Richleen, I'll start sharing my slides, or your slides.
Thank you. As Emily was just saying, and of course, I think there's also a bit of an add-on to what Norman was sharing with us as well. It's like, Norman mentioned, ensuring that you're following up after meetings, and even if you are able to be with us next week for Advocacy Week, or you want to take action differently by sending an email or making a phone call, I think these like simple steps and like simple instruction is like an easy way to go about it. Especially as we are now being like hearing from the legislators themselves, like what they're looking for and how they want to engage with you, so they can really get to know why they should be supporting certain legislation and why does it matter to you and how it's going to benefit the individual communities that you all are representing and are a part of. So for me, when I am sending out an email, it's quite simple. I like to start off with a really strong subject line. Again, like this is just an example. I think like you all, I try to make sure like I give them a heads up in the subject line so they can know like you should open this because this is what I want to reach out to you about. I want you to support the creative economy this session. And then of course, like start with your greeting, making sure you are addressing them by their proper titles. And then of course, letting them know who you are, where do you live, and why you are reaching out. It's important that you mention where you live because they need to ensure that you need to ensure they understand the direct contact they're having with direct constituents of specific part of their district. Sometimes like representative will know, like for a district like the city of Boston, they will know that they will hear often from someone who's living in JP, but they won't hear as much from someone who's living in Mattapan. So if someone from Mattapan is reaching out, it's very important for them to highlight that because it lets them know that they have an audience there that wants to engage with them. And then I want you to share your support and I want you to share why you're reaching out. I think it's important to highlight that part and say like, I'm reaching out to you because I see this piece of legislation. I see this effort that I strongly support, that I'm strongly passionate about, and I wanted to let you know about it. Share a little bit about it, like share a little, bring them in, educate them. Because again, like Emily was saying earlier, like they might not know, and the staff, they have so much going on, they might not know which legislation you're talking about. So giving them a little piece of, or a little preview will make a huge difference. And of course, connect to your why. In the email, you don't have a ton of time and, to share a lot, but I think it's always important to go with an important why as to like how it will benefit your individual community. So share your reasoning as a resident and how you see this bill benefiting your individual community, or how you see your effort benefiting your individual community. Ruth, if I could just use you for one quick minute, I saw that in the chat you mentioned that you are a former dancer. I think if you can share your story of like how being a former dancer really is important to you and how you would like to bring more active dance classes or whatever about dancing that you really want to share with your individual community that you need your legislator support with, tap into that because that's what's really going to get their support, and that's what's really going to make them see how you living in this part of their district matters and why this cause to you matters for this part of your district or their district overall. So don't forget to highlight that as well. And my favorite part of any email is giving them an action task, an action item. I think anytime you walk away, you sign off on an email, before you sign off, you should always say, and I'm looking forward to seeing you do this and whatever this look like to you. I'm looking forward to seeing you invest to advocating for more investment. I'm looking forward to you showing up in community with me in support of this. Like always give them an action item. You never know like what they will say yes to until you give them the opportunity to say no. So always give them the opportunity to say yes by giving them a very clear next step of what you would like to see them do. If you could go to the next slide, Emily. For a phone call with the legislator, it's pretty much the same thing. I think just introducing yourself, exchanging pleasantries, but automatically getting to your story and sharing your why. and then making an ask. I think it's so much easy. It's a little bit easier in email, and it can be a little frightening over the phone, but remember that you are their constituent. They really do want to hear from you. It really does matter that you are just yourself and that you just share with them what you want to share with them. I think next week, the exciting part of it is like there are so many people we are trying to empower to just make a call and just introduce themselves to their legislator, even if it's a call saying like, hi, I'm Ruth. I'm a dancer. I live in this district, and I'm very passionate about having art education in this district. And I really would like to see how you support art education in the upcoming year. If that's all you have to share, they will take it and they will appreciate it. And their staff will reach out to you. Like Kelsey and Norman was emphasizing on, the staffs are your friend. They're your biggest cheerleader in there. So ensure that you are also including them in your phone calls and email, loop them in if you can get their contact information, because they are going to be your allies in this work. I think, again, just ensure that before you make any call, like Norman emphasized on, know why you're calling, but also make sure you are clear on what your ask is going to be, so that way you can bring them into this movement with you. We're excited to have everyone at the State House next week, and we are more than welcome to walk anyone who's with us next week through this again to ensure that you feel very confident to go talk to your legislators. Some link that you could find, you can also find some of these resources on our website. We have all of them draft out. Like Emily was saying, like they can kind of tell now that we draft out some things for you all, but you're more than welcome to switch a few of it around to make sure it's accommodating to you and what you're reaching out to them about. We also have, if you don't know who your legislators are, please, we have links that we're going to be dropping in the chat after this meeting. You are more than welcome. And on our website as well, you are more than welcome to put your personal information on those links. They are safe, and so that way you are able to find out who your representatives are. And next week, when you join us in the State House, you know who to target and how to go have conversations with them. So if you have any question at all, like, we're all here and we're happy to answer them for you.
Thank you, Richleen. One of the things that I wanted to just emphasize is that legislators and lawmakers have gotten wise to the format email, but if we're talking about like level of impact and like advocacy impact, a meeting is like worth $5. A phone call is worth like $3. An email that you wrote yourself is worth like $2.50. An email that's a form email is probably worth 75 cents. And tweeting is probably worth maybe a dime at this point. So if you think about it, if you haven't been able to schedule a meeting with a lawmaker, you're not able to drop by in person just to say hello and drop off some materials, that phone call, even if you're leaving a message, can be so much more impactful than tagging and tweeting and saying like, vote for more arts money this year. Like, they are actually going to listen to that because you'll leave your information and they'll know you're a constituent. So moving along, Kelsey is going to walk us all through sort of the 5 days of action and a couple of other pieces of communications for next week, so that we are all like, the ripple effect is in effect. All right, Kelsey, I'm sharing slides again.
Yes, so I am here to talk about communications. So I'm going to reclaim the tweet. And while I wouldn't recommend calling out your legislator over Twitter, it can still be incredibly helpful to try to get the rest of your community or network to engage with the work we're doing. So from a community action standpoint, please still use X or Twitter, or don't, or use another platform, that's fine. But yeah, there are better ways to engage with legislators than to tweet at them. Anyways, so we are going to publish a lot of communications over MASSCreative's social media platforms next week, as are our co-host organizations, which include MAPC and Norman. So please keep an eye out for any sort of content you're seeing about Advocacy Week in general, and also the celebration at the State House. And if you wouldn't mind, we would appreciate if you would share it out with the rest of your networks, because we do want this to be as inclusive as possible. And this is a statewide advocacy week. And there are, at least speaking for MASSCreative, there are 3 of us here, and we have a pretty wide reach on our social media platforms, but we could use as much help as we can get, really getting the word out into every creative pocket of the state. And that requires all of us. So if you see something, retweet it, share it on Instagram, use the hashtag Create Advocacy 2024. If you're planning on hosting an advocacy event, please let us know or tag MASSCreative if you're posting about it on social media, so we can also help amplify the event. Just expect to see more emails from us, and again, communications in general, because we have a lot of information that we want to share with you to help you feel as informed as possible, so you can also feel as confident as possible in your advocacy. And finally, we've already shared the link for the homepage for Creative Sector Advocacy Week. Definitely take another look at that. We've posted a lot of blogs with different guides to help you feel more confident in contacting your legislator, setting up advocacy meetings with your legislator. Again, they're not perfect templates, so please inject your own creativity and use your best judgment. They're merely there as a tool to help you feel more confident going into these meetings. But again, we have these resources and more available on that page. So definitely keep that open throughout next week. Thank you, Emily. And then just a brief overview of what you can expect to see from us. So we want to set the stage for you next week to build on your advocacy, which means that on Monday, you can expect to see communications from us with just simple how-tos on finding out who your legislator is if you don't currently know who your state representative or state senator is, and then also how to reach out to them, so how to find their office's contact information. Then on the following day, we'll send out more information about different cultural policies we are working on as a guide for you to use to engage in those conversations. So that will look something like an outline of the 5 bills that we're working on in the creative sector legislative agenda. You've probably seen some communications from us already, or hopefully you have, about each of these bills. You'll see it again. You'll also see some information about upcoming work that we're going to do around the FY25 budget. Mass Cultural Council has already put in a request for $28 million for the agency in FY25, and we're supporting them in that ask. So you'll see more resources to be able to talk about that with your legislators. But there are other issues you care about too. So please do not feel limited to just talking about these cultural policies when you reach out to your legislator. If you want to talk about something else that's related, like there's a housing bond bill that has a hearing tomorrow, and Emily's going to talk about that more in a little bit. And we know that the housing crisis is affecting artists as much as it's affecting, it's affecting all of us, right? So if you want to talk with your legislator about the need for more and affordable housing in the state, please feel empowered to do that as well. Then on Wednesday, if you are at the State House, please help us showcase everything, all the performers and exhibitors who you'll be able to enjoy at the State House or enjoy seeing at the State House, as well as the speakers. And you can again use that hashtag Create Advocacy 2024 in your posts. If you are not at the State House that day, no worries. You'll see pictures of it afterwards, so you can feel like you are part of it. But in the meantime, we're going to encourage you to amplify what's happening in your own creative community at home. We want to use that Wednesday as an opportunity to really showcase the breadth and depth of the creative sector in Massachusetts. And that's not limited to Boston or the State House. So please share out the good work that your local cultural districts or councils are doing, or just other artists and creatives who you want to give more of a platform to. On Thursday, the comms there are going to be all about building out our advocacy networks. So it's great that we're now feeling empowered to reach out to our legislators about these issues. And then what can we do to help 3 other people in our immediate networks feel confident doing the same? And on Friday, we'll do a bit of a self-reflection that will also transform into long-term advocacy planning, because as Norman said, we don't want this to be a one-time event or something that only happens 1 week out of the year. We want to feel empowered to advocate year-round so that we can build up more political power in the state and also have a greater chance of actually getting the policies that we want passed. So that long-term advocacy planning will look something like, what are the actions I can take in the next 3 months to make sure that the issue I care about remains at the forefront of my legislators' attention? Any questions about communications or what that plan will look like? All right, Emily.
Thanks, Kelsey. Yes, not to demean social media at all. It is a really great way. It is also actually a really great way to organize. Digital organizing is a real thing. So thank you for lifting that up, and we should all do more of it. So I'm going to share a little bit about things that you can ask for. And we talked about this at the last week at the last training, but it bears repeating. As we know, right, there are a lot of bills that the legislature is considering. And there's a budget that the legislature is considering. And there's also going to be probably more bills that are filed, like an economic development bond bill that's going to get filed and considered. So there are lots of different things that you can advocate for that would probably move our sector forward. Last year, MASSCreative worked and was in conversation with many of you around talking about what pieces of legislation and what policy was going to really move us forward as a sector. We knew we had gone through globally, we'd all gone through an enormous disruptive event that was traumatic and had changed the way we did our work, right? We're all on Zoom here. It also changed the way we thought about our priorities. And so we wanted to really take some time to engage with folks to really get feedback about what would be meaningful legislation. And from that, the creative sector agenda was born. I will get to the budget in a second. The creative sector agenda was born. And so these are 5 bills that directly address big concerns of the sector. So the first one is Creative Space Preservation Act. This is a bill that would make it so that communities would have options and ways that they could local government could make sure that spaces that artists use to make, rehearse, perform, showcase, co-create would be preserved, and that there would be more of those spaces. The Cultural Equity and Tourism Bill would make sure that when we are marketing the Commonwealth, that cultures and communities and organizations that are often left out of the big, shiny, front page, glossy tourism guides are included, by making sure that they have the necessary resources to have a great website or to buy an ad in one of those travel magazines and really drive more traffic to more regional and local tourism to their spaces. The ACE Act is about bringing more accessibility, both programmatically and physically, into our cultural spaces. This would provide grants for cultural organizations and creative locally owned businesses to make to put into practice recommendations that they've received from accessibility consultants or ideas that they have for making their spaces more accessible to the disability community. The PLACE Act is a percent for art bill that would take a small percentage of all of the large state building projects and put it aside so that there's public art in or on that building project. The thing that's really great about this bill, and it was really thanks to collaboration with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council that we were able to sort of figure out how to put this into the bill, is that there's definitive language that says communities have to be involved and have input into what that public art is going to look like, right? And then finally, the Downtown Vitality Act would take a small percentage of online sales tax that's collected and create a fund that would support cultural districts, business improvement districts, parking benefit districts, and Main Street associations. These, and with a priority in gateway cities and low income communities. These are, we know, ways that really help organize and attract people to come and actually enjoy their downtowns and main streets. And we know that the arts community really benefits when that happens. So these are 5 bills that you can consider, and I'm sure in the chat you've already seen that there are links where you can learn more about these, get some fact sheets, get some, you can endorse them, but these are 5 things you can talk about. I'm also going to go back. I'm going to try to go back. Whoa, this is fun. Okay, so let's talk about the fiscal year 25 budget. So in right now, I suspect that Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll and their staffs are getting ready for Governor Healy to walk out and give the State of the Commonwealth at the State House. That's happening tonight. So first one that she's got to do, she's going to talk about all the good work that her administration has been able to do over the last year, many of which has benefited the creative community. And then we think next week, she's going to release her second budget. And we know, based on every piece of reporting that's coming out of the State House, that this is going to be a tough budget year. Revenues have slowed down. There has been increased costs of things that none of us would have expected we would need to take care of or pay for in the state. And so we are expecting that there will be a need for sustained and passionate advocacy around making sure that if cuts are being made to budgets, that the Mass Cultural Council, the largest state investment in the arts and cultural community, is not disproportionately cut. Frankly, we're actually going to make an ask of more, as Kelsey said. So you can see that in the last couple of years, we collectively together have really worked hard to advocate for incremental increases to the budget. And so last year was a really high watermark with 25 million. Our long-term goal is to get us to a $5 per capita. So the state is paying $5 for every resident of the Commonwealth to have more arts and culture. That ends up being about $35 million. Naturally, we're not going to get $10 million in 1 year, especially in a tough budget year. So this year, we hope you will join us to advocate for $28 million. That's what the Mass Cultural Council is requesting, and that is what we are going to support and back up with them. So that we know that that's where our goal is, but we are going to need to keep our eye on the ball to make sure that we don't fall short of that 25 million. But let's start high in our negotiations this year. Finally, I want to talk about the Affordable Homes Act. This is a piece of legislation that the governor filed in October, and it is her housing bill. I think many of us around the Commonwealth, and this certainly came up when we were in conversation in community last year, are feeling the effects of not having enough housing to house everyone who lives or wants to live in Massachusetts. And that shows up in lots of different ways. But for the creative community, we know in particular, we are hearing from organizations who are saying we can't keep people because they can't afford to live in our communities. We are hearing from artists who are saying, I want to continue to practice and contribute to my community and my neighborhood, but I can't afford to stay here. And so we, as an advocacy group, feel that it's really important for us to work to show up for this Affordable Homes Act. This is not to say that we are advocating for a specific carve out for creative workers, because creative workers like nurses and teachers and social workers and plumbers and lawyers all deserve housing, right? And deserve to have housing that they can afford to live in, and that is in the communities that they want to live. But we are looking to join in this. So you'll see on this slide sort of the greatest hits summary of what's included in this bill. It would channel a ton of money into increased housing production, tax credits, developers credits. Literally, the state itself would create 22,000 new affordable housing units, as well as 12,000 additional units of middle income housing, right? There's going to be new home ownership opportunities. There's also built into the bill is a real commitment to a green economy, right? Figuring out ways to do this without increasing our carbon footprint. And one of the things that I think is pretty, like, I just want to highlight is this accessory dwelling unit provision. So say you have a basement that if you finished it, could become a lovely studio that you could rent to an artist or to your aging parent. Say you own a barn on the Cape that if you turned that into a like apartment, like a little bit of a suite, a couple of, you know, 1 or 2 apartments, or just 1 apartment that could hold a seasonal worker for the season, right? Maybe you would make a little bit of money off of that. Maybe you would give it to them for free because you're a very generous person. Right now, if you want to do that kind of accessory dwelling unit build out, you have to get special permitting and permission from local government in order to do it. And this bill would change that. So it would say, like, you don't have to get the local permitting. You can do it if you want to do it. The other big piece of policy that's really important in this bill is it would seal eviction records. So if you have been evicted from a home, that record would be sealed, and it wouldn't negatively impact your ability to get future housing because of that eviction. So there is much more chalk fill in this bill. And there's some links. There's the summary that the governor put out, as well as some information from both CHAPA as well as Abundant Homes, which are 2 groups who are advocating on this, who are really centered on housing advocacy in Massachusetts and are amazing resources. The big thing here is that tomorrow, the Joint Committee on Housing will be holding a hearing on this bill. It will be in Gardner Auditorium, which is the largest space a hearing can happen in the State House. And they're doing that because they assume there are going to be a lot of people turning out for this bill. There's also, you'll notice it's starting at 11 and it's scheduled to go until 5. Most hearings for committees that are considering a full docket of bills end at like noon, if they started at 10 or so. So they are expecting a lot of people to turn out for this. We've already passed the deadline if you wanted to show up and testify in person, but written testimony is being accepted by January 19th. On this Friday at 5 p.m. And they're in the chat. You can see some information about how to do that. Sometimes written testimony can feel super overwhelming, and this might not be the right time that you want to take action on this. But next week, when you are talking with your lawmakers, you can absolutely talk about how you feel the Affordable Homes Act is a really important part of making sure that the creative economy and the creative sector really thrives in Massachusetts. And you can say, we hope you'll consider that when you're considering this bill. This bill, as we all know, when bills are filed, particularly when they're filed by the governor, this is the first hearing that's going to happen. This is the hearing on the governor's bill. Then most likely the Committee on Housing in the House will come up with their own version of the bill. They will debate it. They will have a hearing on it. It will then move over to the Senate. Kelsey and Norman, if I'm talking out of my right ear, tell me. But the Senate will do the same thing. So there are going to be multiple steps along the way to advocate for this bill. But we want to make sure you know about this and know that we're paying attention to this as a place where, frankly, the creative sector can build some solidarity with other groups who are thinking about this issue. As I said, MAPC has been doing a lot of work on this bill. And so I just wanted to hold some time. Norman, I'm sure there are many details I left out about the housing bill, but if you have any other thoughts, it would be great.
Yeah, two things that I want to mention that I think are really important. One, I'll give you the bad news, or not the bad news, the honest news first. This is a bond bill, so the money that's in it is not guaranteed to be spent. It needs to go through a complicated process to eventually get allocated, but that money can't really be spent until it's bonded and passed. So by being included in the bill, it is a step forward to that money being spent. That's the sort of the complicated facts of the matter. The good news is that one of the things that is included in here on the policy side that I know that MAPC is really excited about is the transfer fee component, which would basically give communities a new tool to generate revenue for affordable housing and grow their partnership with the Commonwealth to address some of these housing crises. So they basically would allow communities to collect a small fee, either 0.5 to 2% at the point of sales on houses over a certain amount. I believe in this legislation, it's $1 million homes. So that money would then go to address housing challenges and climate change. So I think there's some good components of this bill as well that are worth recognizing. And I think that the eviction ceiling is really crucial as well from sort of an equity component. You can often have, folks that are 12 years old be on a a lease, they can get evicted from a house, and that eviction can follow them for the rest of their lives as they attempt to start their own, to get their own, housing. And so that's really crucial. And finally, they would, support create an office of fair housing that would sort of work to help with some of these situations as well. So it's a really good bill that has a lot of good components, and we're excited to advocate for it along with all of you.
Thanks, Norman. Okay, so we've come to, we're just about out of time. First of all, if there are any questions about anything that we talked about, we'll share them now.
Hi, I'm sorry I couldn't find the hand raise. I don't know why. Hi, I'm Ruth. I really appreciate you guys organizing this. I've actually come here, as I mentioned in the chat, out of involving myself in environmental justice and some of the housing issues going on in my neighborhood. If anybody is specifically interested in speaking to me around this issue around affordability and housing, I'd really appreciate it, because everything that I've researched and been learning about, I'm really, really concerned about what's about to happen with this abundant housing situation. It's kind of wrecking my neighborhood. So I would really love to engage with some folks, and that's not the focus of today's meeting, but hopefully you could reach out to me. Thanks.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you. And we are absolutely interested in reaching out. I'm sure we have your registration information from this call, and we can follow up. If there are other folks who'd like to reach out to Ruth, maybe drop your contact information in the chat. Right. Okay. Okay. So other questions? Hey, hi, Sean.
Hey, Emily. Emily and the rest of the MASSCreative folks, and Norman, thank you very much for this. This is both illuminating and quite wonderful to hear. Walking around the State House, because I'm a crazy person, is a bit of a pastime for me. But on a completely different level. I used to do amateur education activism and things like that. A bit of an inside baseball, as it were, question. I'm raring to go because I enjoy this sort of thing. And of course, I will go and speak to both my rep and my senator, my state senator. Is the Senate, are senators more amenable to the arts in general? Are there particular representatives on Ways and Means outside of my two representatives that I should also go speak with? Should I go hit up everyone if I can on Ways and Means or Joint Ways and Means? Is there economic development folks other than that we should be also targeting if we have the time, things like that. In the education space, from public education, we always found that the Senate was far friendlier than the House, so we concentrated a lot of our targeting on this. I don't know the arts landscape whatsoever, and I was wondering if there is something similar.
Yeah, so I think historically the creative sector has found more champions in the Senate than in the House. However, in the last couple of years, it's actually felt like there's the will in the House is there too. So I don't know that the truth is there are more representatives in the House than there are the Senate. And their districts are smaller, so they tend, as a rule, to have a lot of opinions that they have to coalesce into when they're trying to make decisions, right? The Senate has their larger districts, they've got a lot more constituents, they're kind of able to negotiate some of those things, and so you end up sometimes moving things a little faster. But I think the truth of it is that we probably we probably have done ourselves a disservice by overly relying on one chamber than the other, right? We've got to constantly make those relationships. The other thing, again, in my metaphor of like, what is it, of the exchange rate, your opinion matters $5 to your elected official. However, when it's not your elected official, that exchange rate kind of goes down a little bit more. Yes, it's absolutely, it's just, you're not going to get them reelected. And their priorities to their constituents, as it should be. I think one of the things that we do know is that both chairs of Ways and Means and the chairs of Econ Dev are going to have to move a lot of things this year. The chief budget writers are the Ways and Means chairs. So it's kind of harder to get in to see them, but those are good people to make sure that we are connecting with. And this might be a great time to, Hashan, to maybe like pump up and cheer on a constituent of Senator Roderick's so that they feel confident and ready to go. It seems like you are somebody who we should put into service as a mentor to advocates, to first-time advocates. But what else? Is that helpful, Kelsey, Norman? What am I leaving out? Am I lying about my exchange rate?
No, I think you're spot on. Hashan, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Yeah, I think being able to support folks that are doing this for the first time, as somebody who's done it even once before, though it sounds like you may have done it more than once before, is huge, because though there will be folks there that have not done this, and that will make a huge difference. To just simply have somebody who can say, yes, you're doing this correctly, or sort of step in if things seem to be going in a weird direction, which I don't think they will. But I think that's always great to have somebody else they're doing. And I will correct myself once. I know I said on the transfer fee environmental as well. It's just housing. I know there's previous talk about transfer fee going to environmental as well. You'll have to excuse me. It's been a long day and a crazy week. So, but yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I would just say that I think you'll find arts and culture champions in both the House and the Senate. And if your state representative or state senator is not publicly speaking about arts and culture, use it as an opportunity to get the conversation rolling with them, because arts and culture exists in every district. It doesn't matter if you have a Senate district or a House district, it's there. And we just, as sector members, need to do the job of case making and storytelling to make that clear to our elected officials. When I was working in the House, I worked for a state representative who was a graduate of Mass Art and is a practicing artist. And she's the only graduate of Mass Art in the legislature. And that's on the House side. So you will find champions on both sides. I would say that just in terms of like insider baseball, when it comes to the budget, if you work for an organization that's trying to get an earmark in the budget, every state senator is guaranteed a certain dollar amount that they can then divvy up, and reps are not. So think about that in your advocacy, because it will vary district by district in either the House or Senate budgets, and then the conference committee report. But aside from that, just another thing to think about is if you are advocating in support of, we'll use one of the creative sector agenda bills as an example, and it's before the Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development Committee, as 3 of the bills currently are. It's great to engage with the committee chairs, but if your state rep or senator is on the committee and they're not a committee chair, you can still bring this to them and ask them to have a conversation with the committee chairs about this bill and ask them to prioritize it. We are working on a couple of other bills that are in front of 2 other committees. One of them is community development and small business, and it might be the inverse of that, small business and community development, but that's the gist of it. So same thing, if your elected officials are on that committee, talk with them about the Downtown Vitality Act. If your elected officials are on the, I can think of the acronym, but not Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities. There we go. That's the committee that is reviewing the ACE Act currently. Same thing, talk with them about it, ask them to escalate that conversation with the chairs so we can get favorable reports on all of the bills. Hopefully that's helpful.
Hilla, yeah, I think my rep is on on that particular committee, and my senator is on Joint Ways and Means. So yeah, that's definitely great. Thank you very much. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but for anyone who's thinking of doing this and hasn't done it, it's actually really fun. And I think it's great to go with a friend. If you have other folks across the other side of the state that you know, that you've participated with, perhaps if they're in town, go with them, because I think it's probably like good to just see that this is a statewide movement as well. My very amateur 2 cents as well, and I'm happy to partner with anyone on this call if time allows to do that too.
Thanks, Sashan. Okay, so we are at time. I want to just put in one plug. We really appreciate when we get feedback about how you found all the resources we've been able to share out so helpful, and that's one of the things that you count on from MASSCreative. Well, next week, we're going to start counting on all of you, because you are going to be receiving lots of really important information when you are in these conversations with your elected officials and their staff. So at the end of the week, we will put together a little bit of a feedback form, and part of that will include, hey, did you have a conversation with your legislator or a staff member? What did you talk about? What did they ask about? As Norman said, taking notes is so helpful, but that is such crucial information for us. And it's a way that we can collectively sort of move this work forward through an abundance of information. So even if you think it was like, nah, that doesn't seem that important, it totally is. So keep those notes handy, and we are really excited to hear about all of your triumphs next week in your advocacy efforts.